Hey everyone, and welcome as we continue our study through the New Testament, looking at the New Testament church. And today we're looking at Paul talking. We're continuing this section where Paul talks about how relationships should look inside the church and as Christians. And today we're going to look at children and parents, the children and parent relationship. This is short, just the four verses, but we'll go through it, look at the notes real quick, and then finish this up. It says, "Children, obey your parents because you belong to the Lord, for this is the right thing to do. Honor your father and mother. This is the first commandment with a promise. If you honor your father and mother, things will go well for you, and you will have a long life on earth. Fathers, do not provoke your children to anger by the way you treat them. Rather, bring them up with discipline and instruction that comes from the Lord." And so, today Paul's, hitting quickly on these things. He doesn't go deep into to how to do all this and what it all looks like and all that. But the relationship between parents and children is to be reflected, or a reflection of their devotion to the Lord, right? Christian children, or the children of Christian parents, are to obey their parents, and Christian parents are to discipline their children gently, right? He says, "Children, obey your parents because you belong to the Lord." Um, some versions, or the way this could say it, or "Children, obey your parents who belong to the Lord." And then some manuscripts read simply, "Children, obey your parents." And so, but the idea is because we are Christians, because your parents belong to the Lord, and you need to obey them. They're looking out that they have the best interest in for you, and so it's instruction to obey your parents. These verses are quoting Exodus 20:12 and Deuteronomy 5:16, and children who honor and respect their parents also honor and respect God Himself, and blessings, and there's blessings that follow that, right? And the idea here is if you look at it's like, because he says here, we can go back to this and look real quick, right? He says, "Honor your father. If you honor your father and mother, things will go well for you, and you will have a long life on earth." And I don't know how much y'all currently pay attention to, some of the social media trends and some of the things out there. But one of the things you'll see a lot of right now, what's going really bad for people, are you can see examples of children who weren't required, or who weren't taught to obey their parents, right? Or obey anyone, or they never had to, right? You have children who basically can just do whatever they want, and it's this, flipped upside down version of it's the parent or the children running the household. The child just does whatever he or she wants, and we're starting to see the result of that, right? Where we see the result of that, where someone gets pulled over and they throw a temper tantrum. Instead of saying, "I'm sorry, officer, I was speeding," or whatever, they throw a temper tantrum, and like, "You're not going to tell me what to do, and I can do whatever I want," type of attitude. Well, they end up getting arrested, and thrown in jail. And it's like we're we're seeing examples where a lot of children are being raised where it's the child running the household and not the parents running the household. And that's not the way it should be, right? The children should listen. If you ask your child to do something, the child should do it. And we know children aren't going to be perfect. We know that. But there's a reason why you raise children this way. It can be fun. It can be easy sometimes to, maybe not fun, but it can be easier sometimes just to give in, right? And to, well, the child doesn't want to do this, or he wants to do this, or she wants to do this, so we're just going to, but you end up not, you end up hurting the child in the long run, because they don't learn that not everything they don't get everything they want, right? They can't just whine, or cry, or throw a fit, and get what they want. And if you're allowing your children to do that, then you're doing them a disservice, right? Again, it's hard, right? Parenting is hard. Raising a child is hard. Me and my wife have done it. We've been there. But one of the things that we consistently did was we were consistent in what we did. We were the parents. Our daughter did not run things, right? Now, she may have been spoiled, but when it came to discipline and behavior and things like that, we took that very serious. And there's a reason why because undisciplined children who get everything they want, or who can whine and cry and get what they want because mom or dad just doesn't want to deal with it, grow up to be adults who do that, and they can't function in society because they get to into the real world and they think they can just throw a fit, or throw their sucker in the dirt and get what they want. And in the real in the real world, you get, you know, may sometimes real literally, but figuratively, you get punched in the throat, you get punched in the head for doing something like that, and people are going to push back, and so you can't go into the real world and do those type of things. And so we need to raise our children in an environment of discipline where they're not allowed to do that, because it creates an adult. When you discipline them, you create an adult who's going to be able to function and behave in society as well. And this is what Paul means by things will go well for you and you will have a long life on earth. Because if you don't, a lot of times, especially in this day and age, someone who wasn't disciplined did not live long. And so here he's proven that, and I think that still applies today, whether it goes to discipline in your behavior, in the way you eat, in the way you take care of yourself, all that kind of stuff, right? All that ends up leading to a longer life and a healthier life based on being taught discipline and self-control, and that this world is difficult. And so again, that sometimes it's hard for teachings around children, but I think it's important. I think that's what Paul is getting at here, because we're seeing a society where that's not happening. We're seeing a society where children run the house versus the parents running the house, and it's not good, right? It's not a positive influence. It's a negative influence, and it's something as Christians we need to make sure that we discipline our children in a Christ-like manner, which we're getting ready to talk about here in this next verse. But this is why this is so important. That's why I'm kind of hitting on it a little bit, because it can be hard, right? Discipline children's not easy. I never liked having to discipline my daughter, right? It's not something that we were like, oh wow, this is fun, this is great. It's not fun, but it's for the benefit of them. We get asked a lot of times, because and I'm not trying to brag, but our daughter is was and is still, very well behaved, very respectful, very, and everyone's like, well, how? And it was everyone's like, well, I can't believe how respectful she is. How did y'all do that? How did one part of it's her nature? I'm not going to lie there, but the other side of it was we consistently disciplined her when she was wrong, right? Or if she did something wrong, it was a continual basis. We partnered in that, and if she did something wrong, she was disciplined for it. And she didn't run our household. Now, like I said, I will admit, and we'll both admit that she was spoiled, but we also did not let her throw fits. If she threw a temper tantrum, or she whined or cried, she got disciplined for it. And so that was the way that we raised, that's the way we were raised. That's the way we raise our children. And you create functioning adults who can function in society, and you prepare them for success by doing that. Again, it's not easy, right? I didn't like doing it. My wife didn't like having to do it, but it's something you have to do in order to, you know, prepare your child. And in the end, like, more than just making them prepare for society and being a functioning adult in their life, it prepares them for being a Christian, right? Because if a child is raised to where they're the ones in control, they're the ones who, all they got to do is whine or cry to get what they want, or they're not disciplined and they can just do whatever they want, then that's good. The idea of them becoming a Christian, Christianity to them is to be, oh no, because Christianity is self-sacrificing. It's giving up what I want in order to serve God. And so you, in that same vein, you create someone who, in the end, is not going to want to follow Christ, because that's a sacrifice. That's not going to serve them. They're going to want to do something that serves them. And so that's the other side of this is why we would want to raise someone who serves the Lord, right? Respects their parents, respects authority, respects God. That's why you would want to do that. And so I know I went on about this, but I think this is important. This is only 3 verses, but there's a whole lot packed into these 3 verses that we need to look at, and I think we see that in society today. So I hope that's helpful. But so to move on to this, right? Then he gives one verse about how fathers, right, and this applies to both fathers and mothers, but fathers, like, don't provoke your children to anger. And so often, and I've seen this, and I'm sure we've all seen this, like fathers can provoke, or a mother can, in the disciplinarian, in either way, can provoke their children to anger by being harsh or unjust. And that's not what we're called to either. I've seen this in from the flip side, right? And so we talked about the children, but from a parent side, I've seen where Christian parents who are so hard on their children, right? They almost expect perfection from their children. They push this Christian narrative of almost perfection, and and it's a provoking, right? It's not an understanding. Okay, on that, they're a kid, right? Yes, I have to discipline them, but I need to show them love and give them grace and all that stuff at the same time. I've seen just such strict, just, oh my goodness, right? Isolation of their children, and they don't understand the real world, and just the parents who again, I've seen it just provoke their children to anger by the way they treat them. They're not fair. They're not, consistent. They're not all these things. Rather, right, he says to bring them up. Parents should give their children a discipline and instruction that comes from the Lord, or the way this could be said is discipline instruction about the Lord, right? Both of those can apply. And that way they learn a way of living that is good and pleases God. And so it's like truly have them understand why, like, hey, again, I'm disciplining you. This is why. This is why we do this. This is who we serve, right? Let them know about that thing, but do it in a loving way. Do it in a Christ-like manner. And that's how us as parents are to raise our children. It's not to be disciplined that is not excessive. Excessive discipline is abuse, and that's not what we're calling for. But you're to be loving and gentle so that children are not turned from the God, but draw to him. And I can't tell you how many people, friends I had growing up, people I knew in the church, kids I knew in the church, I watched them, and I saw how their parents were, and they were excessively um, they were excessive in their discipline. It was ridiculous. They expected perfection from their children, and and to this day, a lot of them won't have anything to do with Christ because of that. And that's what Paul is warning about here. It's like, no, we're not to be abusive in our discipline. We're not to be so, like, expect perfection from our children. We're not to just, turn around and spank them and discipline them every time we turn around and can, right? But there's got to be a balance, right? There's got to be a balance with how we discipline the children, our children, and introducing them to God. If everything that they see about God is discipline, then they're not going to want anything to do with it when they grow up. And so again, I've seen that, and so we've got to be very careful with how we balance that. And our discipline should always come from a place of love, not anger, not 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 anger, and oh, I'm upset, so now I'm going to do this, but then turn around. That's not what we're looking at here. And so it needs to be something that comes out of love, and that's something we always try to do. We weren't perfect at it, but it wasn't. We didn't want our reaction or our discipline to be a reaction in anger. It's like, oh, you did this, so now I'm going to admit that there were times that I know I did that. I'm sure my wife did too. But for the most part, we would have conversations. So, hey, this is why you're being disciplined. This is why you got that spanking. This is why this is being taken away. This is why you're being grounded, right? Because we love you. Because you did something you shouldn't have done. We asked you not to. And because you did that, then we're taking this away. And this is the punishment you'll get. And when you can have conversations, like even little kids, right? Someone as young as 3 or 4 can understand that, right? Now you might need to break it down to their level, but you can do that. And so that's why discipline and all this on both sides, right? Disciplining children, but also having self-control on a parent, on especially the fathers, who should be the main disciplinarian of a household, right? That's why this is so important. We're not going to be perfect at it. Children aren't going to be perfect. Parents aren't going to be perfect parents. They're not going to be perfect disciplinarians. But this is why this we're called to. And I think, and I've talked about this, we're seeing the result of a society that doesn't practice this, right? You can watch the news. You can watch a lot of the police video footage and those type of things that happen when it doesn't happen, right? A lot of it's because parents aren't, the children or the parents aren't Christians, and no one's in a Christian household, but that's the result. And so if we could get these 4 verses right, that would help a lot with that would help us a lot just with society and how children are behaving, how parents are behaving. It's a cycle, and it's something that we need to stop and we need to practice. So I hope this was understandable. I hope you learned from it. I hope, I know it was 4 verses, but we dug a little bit deeper into it. But I want you to understand why this is so important, and why, even though Paul only writes about it for 4 verses, the impact it can have on society and the souls of people. So, as always, I appreciate everyone who takes the time to watch these videos. I encourage you to subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so. That way you can get the notifications when we publish these daily. But like I said, I really appreciate everyone who takes the time to watch, and I hope y'all have a wonderful day.